Hey guys, and welcome. I am Morgan Giss McDonald, founder CEO of Paper Raven Books, and I have with us today a behind the books interview with author Julie Carrick. Julie, thank you so much for being with us here today.
I am excited to be with you today. This is awesome.
So you are in the middle of launching your new book, Unfailing Grace, and it has already, it's already hitting number ones in religion and spirituality, and we're just continuing to see, more sales and downloads and excitement and reviews, and you're getting this sort of amazing outpouring from your book coming out. And I would love for you to just tell us a little bit about, what is Unfailing Grace about, and who do you really feel like you wrote this book for?
It's my life story. It's really my life story of grace. For so many years, being a recording artist, being a speaker, I feel like I'm doing this backwards. Being a speaker and a recording artist, I have been very vulnerable in many places throughout the world where I've shared my ministry. And time again, I would get back from the end of an event and I would think, oh man, I wish they knew the whole story. I really wish I had time to tell the whole story. And so it really, it's a hard one to kind of wrap my head around. So when I started to write, I thought I want to be able to fill in the gaps of all of those stories. Mm-hmm. And then for me to be able to say that title, Unfailing Grace, where did grace come from in my life? And that took me back to childhood. Being raised in a Christian faith in the Catholic Church, baptism. I was an infant. I don't remember my baptism, but I know that's where grace began. And so, but I wanted to go, where do I remember grace coming into my life? And so I went back to my childhood and just kind of started the journey of where God has been so, very, very present in my life, and to start telling those stories. And so I connected in that way a little bit in the writing, to what to write. And then when it was very clear that some of the stories of my life were not easy stories. There were some very, very dark days in my life. And I thought God was there even in the dark days. And then the beauty of miracles that I experienced. And I realized God is in those miracles. He is those miracles. And I thought, if I'm getting emotional just thinking about those things and wanting to share deeper, it needed to be written. And so that's kind of what prompted me to start writing, or the process of wanting to write a book.
Yeah. And so I think what's so compelling about your book is that you share very true and vulnerable stories from your life that are extremely difficult, like grief and heartache and difficult things. And yet you're able to also in the same, within the same scope, kind of show how there have been true miracles and how God has been very present in our lives, or in your life, which sort of shows that maybe God's more present in our lives than sometimes we even see. And I really think this speaks to our modern society, because we tend to go through our lives and sort of feel like, well, if times are bad, then maybe God's not there. And if times are good, then I don't know, maybe God cares, maybe not. But we don't really stop and reflect and really think about how God may be working in our lives. And because you're able to give us sort of this bigger story of your life, you're able to say, this happened and it didn't make sense at the time, but then later, it was revealed. Are there any particular stories or moments from the book that you think would be sort of powerful for people to know about? Anything that when you were writing, you really felt like, this is a story that I know I'm meant to share?
There were so many, but the one in particular that I finally was able to share because of writing the book, and I might get teary-eyed. It was surviving 9/11. It was surviving 9/11. I had never shared that publicly, and I never felt like I could, because there was a real guilt that I went through in surviving that. And for those of you who haven't downloaded and read the book yet, what I mean by that is I was originally scheduled on the flight out of Boston on the 11th of September in 2001. And it was only because of a change in scheduling for the Boston Catholic Television that they asked me to come a week early. And so I was home on the morning of 9/11 instead of being on that airplane. And I had never been able to share that. And this book made it so comfortable for me to share something that was so difficult to speak about before. And I'm just praying that other people who've had these just amazing experiences where God has stood in the gap, and through common life stories, through common shared experiences, we all have these days in our life where something very pronounced, you don't see it until you look back on it, or something happens that makes it revealed. And I think if we share these stories, it makes a difference. And so it made me open up to that story and share it. So that was, for me, that was very healing. It was an amazing thing to be able to share that one. That was one big one. One of the other ones that's just near and dear to my heart is my husband and I. In 2004, it was a very, very difficult year in our family. And that chapter really talking about that year and what we went through as a couple and finding the healing on the other side of it. One of the things that was amazing to me is I've already received an email from a gentleman who said this book has come at the right time because he and his wife are facing the same thing that my husband Kurt and I went through. And he said the joy that we feel this side of healing is giving him hope for he and his wife to find that joy again. So it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah. Guys, you can actually get your own copy of Julie's book for free today if you go to paperravenbooks.com/unfailing grace. We dropped the link in the description of our video here, and you can grab that today. I do think that is exactly, it's both sides of the stories that really draw people in, because when we're going through the most difficult times, we really want to connect with someone who has been there and has seen, as you said, like healing and hope on the other side. Mm-hmm. And if we have lived a life that we know that we've had miracles and just blessings show up in our lives, that maybe we don't pause and reflect, even from sort of the side of blessing, stopping and thinking like, wow, what if I just reflected on my own life? And I sort of almost like I can even imagine a timeline of sorts, kind of moving through the different phases and milestones and parts of my life, and just allowing, God to reveal to me what he's been doing this whole time, and really allowing myself to see that and to be grateful for that. So whether we're in a time of really kind of difficulty and despair and needing that hope, or whether we're having a good life and maybe we haven't recognized that some of the heartache and suffering that we've been through was for our good all the way along. I think that's the power of sharing both sides of the story. So I really want to kind of reflect back for you. I think it's amazing that you've been able to share such raw and vulnerable stories. And I know it's not, easy to talk about it, like in public and things like that. And you're always sort of probably curious, like you're always towing that line of like, how much do I share so that it feels relatable? And yet how much do I sort of keep for personal reasons? And if you don't mind, I'd love to ask a little bit about your journey of writing the book and becoming an author. When did you know that you were going to write this book? Do you remember if there was any sort of moment?
There was an absolute definitive second of the morning. I can tell you exactly when it was. So last year, first of all, I never considered like actually me being the one to write the book. My husband is the writer, and he's next, by the way. He's next.
Okay, perfect.
But it was really funny. It was 30 days into the Lenten season last year, and every day for 30 days. Not one, I think the smallest amount was 5, and it got up towards, like 10 people a day were saying, when are you going to write a book? You really need to write a book. And it was 30 days in a row.
30 days in a row?
I mean, it was crazy. So doing parish missions for the Lenten season, and we were in Arizona and in Ohio. And then we did a regional tour that took us through New Mexico and into West Texas. And so on day 30, Kurt and I were doing our morning prayer together. And I said, God, I'm hearing this every day. I mean, is it you tapping me, or, is it just people wanting more detail? I really didn't know. And I said, I need someone with an authority in my life, someone who I can trust to be, a good steward of gift. And they need to be the one to be your voice. And we were at breakfast. Kurt and I were at breakfast. And this beautiful couple in Midland were sitting there. And she said, in the middle of breakfast, without knowing any of this, she didn't know anything about the people asking for the book. But in the middle of breakfast, she just said, you need to write a book. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to write a book. But then knowing her, it was like, she'll try anything. Let's just do this. She's got this great energy. Her husband, I always say, is the voice of reason. Like, he's the one that'll say, well, now, if you're going to write a book, how are you going to write the book? How is it going to be done? There's always the practical side. So when he chimed right in and said, yeah, we need to make sure it gets done, I said, oh my God, I'm writing a book.
That was, you asked for the confirmation and you got it.
Got it. It was like the 1-2 punch, just boom. So yeah. So that was on day 30 of Lent last year that I started. I knew I would be writing. And then it was really an amazing, yeah.
So it was kind of like one of those lightning bolt moments where it's like, okay, yes, this is happening. And then what did you do? Like, how did you sort of say, okay, I've never written a book before. I don't really know what this looks like. Do you remember what those early days were of trying to figure out how to start writing?
Well, I do. And I remember kind of reaching out and saying, what do I do? It was, the first thing is write down enough, just start writing your thoughts and your feelings and just see if something is going to come out of this. And so when I left Midland, I got on an airplane and I flew to Louisiana. And I started writing. I just started. I thought, well, if I'm going to write about grace, I want to go back to where I remember it. And I thought, the only thing I know is chronological. At that point, I'm like, I'm not an author. I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm just going to do it chronological. And then I sat down and I literally started telling the stories as if I were talking to somebody. Because the first day of writing, I almost threw my computer out the window of the hotel, because I thought, if I have to try to figure out how to write, I don't know what I'm doing. And so I thought, I do know how to tell stories because I've told stories for 20 years. And so I started telling the story into my computer, like typing. And then I'll be honest, I eventually got a microphone so I could talk to my computer and just, let myself talk and let the stories go. And I was about maybe 20 days into writing. It was just before I came home, or maybe less than 40, maybe less than 20 days. But I remember going from Louisiana to Iowa. And then I had one other stop. I don't remember where that was now, but I remember kneeling down on the floor in the hotel that I was in and just weeping because the story was becoming so real. And it was so beautiful. It was so powerful because the first stories that came were these amazing moments with God, just these amazing moments from my childhood, knowing that he loved me, and then allowing it to go deeper it was beautiful. And then I realized how many miracles I had experienced, and I felt so just unworthy of these miracles. And then I thought, but these need to be shared. And then that gave me the encouragement to keep writing. And then, of course, I sent the manuscript to you guys. And oh my gosh.
So they're definitely, so we did bring it in. It helped kind of restructure a bit, sort of, shape it. But when you were still in the process of speaking into the microphone and telling the stories, did you ever have thoughts of ooh, should I share this? Is this too much? Or how do you remember making those kinds of decisions? And how did you ultimately decide what you wanted to include in the book? And are there things that you ended up taking out because it was too real or too much, too honest?
So yeah. So there's one in particular. When you get the book, there's a chapter in there about when I was living in Flagstaff, and there was an artist many years ago by the name of Rich Mullins, and Rich and I had wonderful communication throughout the years that we knew each other. He was a wonderful, just a wonderful person to bounce ideas off of and things, because he was already so well known in the Christian music world. And part of that story was just almost surreal. And the part that I almost took out was the day after he passed away. He died in a car accident, and it was on a Friday. And on Saturday, I was at Nativity Church in Flagstaff, and that's where we used to meet each other. And he would come into the church and we would chat, and he would ask questions about the Catholic faith. And then I would ask him questions about the music industry. And anyhow, this one Saturday, I waved at him because he was like in the back of the church. And as I waved, he just walked out the back door of the church. And I went across the street to where my children and my mom were, our home. And I said, Mom, I wish you to come because Rich was there tonight. And she said, honey, he couldn't have been there. He died yesterday. His people called and told us. And I thought, oh my God, it was like, what was that? How was I able to see him? And at one point I thought, maybe I shouldn't put this in the book. Maybe it's like too far out there for somebody, and I thought maybe I shouldn't. And I was just really questioning that. And that same day that I was questioning whether or not I should put that in there, I had an experience in my office where I was putting something away, and the very first thing that I opened up to was this note from Rich Mullins. It was this on this CD. And I was like, that's crazy. And then like a day after that, I get a call from another person who was part of the Ragamuffin band years prior, and I have never spoken to this person. And all of a sudden he calls me and he's like, hey, I want to get together. I wanted to talk to you about some stuff. And I was like, okay, Rich is going in the book, he's in.
He's in. He's in.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's just so in your face, you can't say no to it. And that's what I felt like with that one.
So the theme that's coming up here is just ask. Ask for like guidance, and you just might get it.
You absolutely will get it. It's amazing. Yeah, yeah. And there was one story that I opted to keep out. I don't mind telling it. I don't mind talking about it. But I didn't.
You don't need to tell stories that you felt like you made an intentional decision to not put in the book. I think any of us who are writing any parts of our stories, we always have to make that decision. But some people are very curious about like, well, how do I know? Like, what is that internal feeling of like, that's just a little bit too much, or is it just not relevant in some cases?
Right. Yeah. Well, one of those, which I opted not to share, and I really, I don't think it had it wouldn't have made a difference to that many people. And so it was more of a personal thing that really was not relevant to many, many lives. It was something that was just more from me. And that was one that I kept out. And there was another one that I kept out because I'm trying to really be a good steward, because the story is so much my life. And that includes, I have adult children, I have a husband, and I wanted to be a good steward with the stories of our family. And there were a couple of those stories that when I bounced it off of certain family members, I said, is that all right if I share this? And they said, no, it's not. And you need to be respectful of that. When it's a story that's a real story and it involves other people, I felt like that was the best way for me to be a good steward of the story, and to be honest and to be obedient when I ask a question. If I hadn't asked and I put it in, it may have been bad. And something in me said, ask first. And so I did. And when I got the answer, I have to respect that. So I think respect is very important when you're writing.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And that's something that we, particularly when we self-publish our books and it doesn't go through kind of a traditional publisher, we have to make those harder decisions, because a traditional publisher will typically ask for like legal consent from every single person who's in the book. And so when you don't, when you are, for a lot of us, we are publishing our books ourselves, or we're using a team like Paper Raven to get it out there ourselves. And so, it requires us to kind of have integrity and to really think about, as you said, being a good steward of your story and being honest and authentic, but also, yeah, kind of respecting the relationships that you do have. So thank you for walking us through your process. And
Sure.
so you talked your way through the first draft, telling stories into the recorder, which I think is brilliant. And then we brought it in, and we did start from kind of that developmental stage. And so we walked the book through several levels of editing. What was, oh, I just lost Julie. She'll pop back on. When she pops back on, I'll include her again. But one of the fascinating things about Julie's manuscript is it came in very much as if, it sounded like she was talking, right? And so we ended up doing some levels. I was just talking as you were coming back on.
Yep.
Some levels of editing to take it from it read as if you were literally talking, which you were.
Right.
And so then when we came back through and we're doing some of that reshaping and the editing and things like that, we turned it into more how the words would normally be written rather than spoken, because it's just slightly different.
Right.
What was that sort of editing and revising process like for you?
I loved it. This is the funny part of me is like my parents, if you knew my parents, my dad is literally a German engineer. So things are structure and they make sense and everything has a purpose. My mother is Greek Italian. She flies by the seat of her pants. There's never a plan. And I am a direct combination of these two people. So the first part was like, I could write anything I want to just, tell the story. So the editing process was marvelous. It really, it made me take a look, especially in the things that, because I come from a certain perspective as a woman and being raised in the Catholic faith, there are things that I just, you just grow up knowing and you assume everybody knows that. Well, part of the storytelling is that you assume everybody knows that. Not everybody does know that. And if I'm really going to share my story with everybody, my most favorite part of the review process was the editing process rather, was when I was asked the question, describe this in a way that makes it part of the story, but also explains what it is. And so it allowed me actually to go deeper and to be more, I felt, engaging to the reader, who would be the person who'd be reading my book. And so that was wonderful. I really, really liked that. It also stretched me a little bit in the, it made me realize there are processes that make sense for the reader. And it was funny. It actually took me to the show. I don't know if you know this one from, it's Canada, and it's a show called Flashpoint. And in Flashpoint, it's a police show. And so you start out in the middle of this huge thing, and then you wonder what brought everybody to that point, and then what's the resolve going to be. And so by doing that little bit of restructure, that helped me so much too, because it was like, I mean, really, who wants to read a story about a little kid growing up in Michigan, right? Like it's, it could have been like, well, why do we need to know this? Versus you start with that flashpoint. There's a very big thing. And then what brought me to this point? And then where did the resolve happen? And so I loved that. I thought it was genius. So, and I never would have thought of that on my own. So that was a gift of that being required to go in and look at it again process.
Yeah. And so, I mean, over the course of months and revisiting and rethinking and rewriting, I mean, you produced this amazingly beautiful book. I mean, in a relatively short time span. You started writing in March. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And
that is
now,
amazing.
Now we're walking it through launch, but you had a really interesting lead up to your launch because you are a musician and you perform across the country. We were able to get pre-release copies of the book for you to take with you at the end of last year, leading into this New Year launch. So what was that like? I mean, how did you use the book in your live performances? You would show up to a church or some city and do a performance, and you had books with you. How did you talk about the book when you were in those live performances, for anyone who's thinking about combining live performances with kind of books?
Absolutely. So what was the most effective part of that was that, as I said, being a presenter for all these years, parish missions and concerts and that type of thing, I always felt like I was leaving something. And so I picked up the phrase from Paul Harvey, and I would just kind of do the little book thing, and I would say, and now you can read the rest of the story, right? I mean, it was the neatest thing to be able to say, I'm giving you the content. You don't have to buy the book to know me, but if you really want to go deeper in understanding who I am, and more importantly, who God is in my life, and it's the same God that wants to be in your life as intimately as he is in mine, it just made me, I think, all the more vulnerable to share. But to a certain point, it made me really look at how I was presenting, and that was wonderful. Again, it really allowed that interesting process to kind of weave its way into my regular artist and speaking life as much as it is now in an author life. So it was a good combination.
So you've been an artist for many, many years. I mean, you have a career, you have a ministry. So you've been a performer for a long, long time. What do you think is going to change for you now that you have the book out?
I'm already seeing the change. It's crazy. It's like, it's an interesting thing that, how do I put this gently? I remember being on a broadcast. I was on a live television out of Portland, Oregon, a number of years ago. And on that same stage were two pastors and me. And both of the pastors, they were both women, and they were very excited about being, women in ministry. And the people that hired me to be there, knowing that I was also involved in ministry, the other two women on the stage were like, well, you're the singer. And it's like, it's almost like there's a lack of, like maybe I should have taken the blonde hair deal back when it was offered. I almost felt like, here's the blonde cutesy who's going to sing for us. And then here are the people who have the actual content. And it's so funny that now that there's a book, it's like, oh, well, we can take her seriously. She's not just speaking and singing about the Lord. There's actually, that title author behind her name. And it really, I am so encouraged already with the number of people who have said, oh my gosh, you've got a book. Well, you know what? There's a conference, or there's this, and all of a sudden it's like changing the window of how people look in to see me a little bit. And I'm thinking, my hope when I realized the book was going to happen, and that the writing had gotten to a point of a manuscript that it could be, and it, most likely would be. I was those could be would be's. At that point, I really got excited, because in my personal life, it's one thing, but I'm also part of a larger foundation with Carrick Ministries, and we have a number of artists who are also speakers and presenters. And I feel like with one of us having this, I am hoping that when I go out and do the conference circuits and all those types of things, that I'll be able to shed that same light on our other artists and bring them to that same, that same focus, because it's not just singing about something. It is a true life experience, and not just a life experience, but deep knowledge that has to be researched and understood and really taken in before it can be shared. It just happens that music is part of it. So it was huge.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And so we did, you had the books with you while you were, on tour and singing and performing at the end of last year. And then it's launching, officially this week. And you can tell the momentum, because you are already, you're about to clear 20 reviews easy, which is a definite threshold for new first-time authors. And the downloads just keep coming in faster and faster. You're hitting number ones on all sorts of religion, spirituality, like all the most relevant categories for your book. And so it's amazing to see that momentum kind of coming through now. What has this week been like for you, this launch? What did you think it might be like? And then what does it feel like now?
Well, one of the things that was very, very sweet was I had this lovely email from the team. And the team they're amazing. First of all, I have to say thank you to the team. They are amazing people. As a recording artist, every time I would do a record or get ready to launch, a new, we didn't launch, we would release different words, but we would release the new record or whatever. You have a producer, you have people who do artwork, you have the drummer, the guitarist, the pianist, everybody that's a part of it. And they're all mentioned by name. Everybody is mentioned in your artwork. And I thought to myself, the people that are behind me with Paper Raven, it was the neatest thing because they said, now rest up because this is going to be an emotional week and, make sure you're taking care of yourself. And I thought, it's going to go on Amazon. What's the big deal? Well, then when that happened and all of a sudden I'm getting these, notes and emails and I'm watching it happen, I was a wreck. I was just like emotional. It was so beautiful. A good wreck, a pretty wreck.
Yeah.
It was awesome. And just really, really something that I didn't expect. I did not expect to feel this emotional about it. It's a process. In many ways, it's very, very similar to the emotion you go through when you're writing lyric and writing music, and then you go into the studio, you record, and then the first, CD comes out or the first download is ready. But the difference, and this is going to sound really bad, the difference with the book versus the recording is by the time I was done with it in the studio, I was kind of done with it. I was like, okay, I'm done. That record is recorded. All of that music is now out of me. It's recorded. Everybody's done their part. I'm ready to go on to the next recording. And my husband would say, you've got to tour that record. You can't just, you can't be done. You have to tour the record. Yeah. And it's like, but you listen to it and you sing it so many times that you're almost tired of it. And with the book, I don't have that same feeling. With the book, I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like I've given birth to a baby and I want to take it and show it to everybody. It's very different. It is. It's really, I didn't expect to be this emotionally attached to it. And it's really, yeah. And of course, with this book, because it's so different with its content, if you will, I want to share a little bit about the QR code.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I've never seen this in a book before. And I have to be honest, I kept this very tight to my chest while we were in the process, just because it was so unique and so different. And I'll be honest, I wanted to be the first person to do this. So with your help, we have. But you can see this. So there we go. I'm not good with cameras.
There it is.
So that's a chapter page right there. And so this little QR code, when you are on, and like this one is the face of God. So I wrote this song about my husband, and it came and it just made sense to fit in this chapter where I was speaking about the relationship between husband and wife. And then you scan this, and somebody described it earlier today and it was perfect. This is the soundtrack that goes with the book.
Yes.
So the book has a soundtrack. It literally has a soundtrack. It's the neatest thing. So, it's not every chapter, but many of the chapters have one of the songs that just became part of that journey. And so to have that in there as part of it, it's such a unique and different thing. I am excited. It's
so cool because it is perfect because you can have your phone right next to you, scan the QR code, it starts playing and you just keep reading. That's a perfect description. It's the soundtrack for the book.
Yeah. So it's cool. Fun. It's really a neat way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So looking back on kind of what you've learned, up to this point, if you could go back to the younger version of yourself when you sort of decided, oh my gosh, I'm going to write a book, what would you go back and tell that version of yourself?
I might tell her to maybe enjoy the process a little bit more. And I would tell her to, because even right now, there are things that I might want to go back in and say, oh, I'd do a second book and say, the missing chapters, or, I might tell her to slow down and not be anxious about it, but to enjoy it more at the beginning. I got to that point by the end, but at the beginning, now I'm completely content. But at the beginning, it was like there was an anxiety of what should I be doing? And instead of letting it be an anxious thing, I would tell her, you're going to enjoy this. You are going to enjoy this so much. And you're going to be able to touch the hearts and the lives of people in ways that you've never done before, and to allow God the freedom sooner than later. And I feel like I almost held him back a little bit in the very beginning of the writing process. I was being belligerently obedient instead of happy obedient. And I think that would be the thing I would change.
Yeah. Beautiful. You guys, get Julie's book today. It is free today. paperravenbooks.com/unfailing grace. Beautiful stories of heartache and miracles and everything in between. Julie, thank you so much for sharing your heart in this book. And thank you for sharing your story with us here today too. It's just been an amazing journey with you. You are a phenomenal person. I cannot wait to see how this book brings so many more people closer to God, really and truly.
Oh, thank you. And I have to say thank you. Honestly, I know I've said it before, but I could not have done this without you guys. I mean, the team at Paper Raven, and for those of you, if I may, a couple of friends who are also in the process right now of writing, but they're with publishers that there is a lack of equity, in my opinion. There's a lack of equity in the world of production, and it doesn't matter if it's books or music or what it is. You give so much of your heart and your emotion and your blood, sweat, and tears. You put yourself into these things, and then a company owns it, and you are paid a percentage of who you are, and it's literally a percentage, and it's not right. And so the way that you all do this with Paper Raven, if anyone, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, they're not paying me to say this. I am 100% telling you, if you have a book, and everybody has the book in you, you all have a story. In fact, Pope Francis this year has dedicated this year for us to tell our stories. And I didn't know that till yesterday. Anyhow,
wow.
Everybody has a story, and to tell your story, you need the right people behind you to help get that story out and to still own your story at the end of it. So kudos to what you're doing. Thank you. It's amazing.
Thank you, Julie. Well, it's been a true honor to be on this journey with you. And this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning. I cannot wait to see what is coming down the road for you and all the ways that God is going to use you and your music and your book and your message. So thank you for being courageous and leaning in.
All right, well, y'all thank you.
Yeah, y'all have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.